The PS2 has a ridiculous selection of games that are available across its vast catalogues, ranging from high quality experiences to lesser known but also with some mixed bags thrown in between. There are also a lot of shovelware titles and budget entries that, for better or worse, they're there and there's not really much we can do about it. But there are some games that, yes, have their quirks and distinctive elements that are worth a try. In Japan, there would be a serious amount of titles that we would not get to see over in Europe, and this was also the same on the original PlayStation, with many titles never seen the light of day in other regions. And again, some of them were quite decent, but yet others are pretty much hit and miss in most regards, but still worth a try, more or less. But if we look at games that came out from Japan, the Simple Series catalogue of games represents a budget lineup of titles that were released, and again this also contributes to some fairly decent titles but yet also very lackluster titles. But they were a good way for smaller development companies to get their foot in the door with games development for the console at the time, but also to give a more affordable lineup of games to be made available to people that really couldn't afford to buy games back then, because not everybody had the big budget to spend money on like $40 or $50 games at that point. So these games would have contributed to those categories. So one of the games we'd be looking at here would go under the name of the Taoshu Highway 2 Road Warrior 2050. That would be volume 112 under the Simple 2000 series, as yes, these entries all got their own individual volume numbers, as there was quite a lot of them, let's just put it that way, to be released on the console, way more than you could ever dare to believe. So what this game primarily ends up as is that it's a post-apocalyptic combat style racer where you play as an individual character who's tasked with getting from one point of a city to another city while carrying medicine in order to save your girlfriend who's been infected with some sort of virus, and the only way to get there is to rush through the many distinct motorways and areas while fending off against many enemies in order to get the medicine to her in time. So once you begin the story, you are given a time limit of 4 hours to get from the start of the game to the end of the game, and it's all in real time. There are different points in the game where you can stop off and you can buy upgrades and additional weapons for your character so that you can make your process and playthrough that little bit easier. But at different points you will find yourself having to stop the car, as you will be surrounded by barricades that you must get through, and you will have to do this by getting out of the car and running around on foot, going into these barricade arena type areas where you'll have to defeat a load of enemies and even in some cases some end of level bosses. And some of them can be quite tricky, as the camera in this game, if one of the flaws I will definitely say that's the most tedious element of it, would be the camera, as you're not really sure of where everything is, and the camera can be very slow and sluggish in order to move, so enemies can hit you off screen and you can't really see where shots are flying in from, and they'll do damage to you over time. But luckily enough, the game doesn't present too much of a challenge overall with regards to item pickups and health, resources and so forth, so you can really keep on top of things. Even with ammo is in plentiful supply, and once you've upgraded your abilities and gain access to more powerful weapons, the game pretty much becomes a cakewalk from that point on. You'll find yourself as you're going through each of the environments, because you're on motorways or highways, it's in a post-apocalyptic format where everything is run down, blown up, there's rubble everywhere. But one of the factors that I found in somewhat repetitive way was each environment pretty much looks the same, but yet at the same time, the more I sat down and played it, funnily enough, I began to enjoy it. It is definitely one of the better games in this catalogue of titles, but it's not to say that it doesn't have its flaws. While you do have those arenas that you'll have to stop at different points and fight off different bosses, there are some mid-level bosses that will appear at different stages that will try to take you out of the equation, so you'll have to make sure you try to defeat them as well before you get to the end of the level. Now, by doing so, it will give you additional currency which you can use then to further upgrade your guns and different types of weapons. But like I said, you'll find yourself gaining enough money way before the game has even ended. that would make things super easy. The game almost gives you the vibe of like a Mad Max, Twisted Metal style element to it, where there's lots of explosions, lots of gunfights. Although the handling can be a bit twitchy and tricky at times, you'll find yourself just randomly just driving into walls at different points, and especially if enemies hit you, it can throw you off course, but it doesn't really cause too much of a concern. You do have a lock-on aiming system. If you hold the R2 button on the controller, you lock onto the nearest enemies, and if you keep pressing the R1 button, then you can shoot your weapons. So you'll have anything from like a pistol to a sawn-off shotgun to an Uzi machine gun, even all the way to a rocket launcher, which you won't get too much ammo for it as you play, but it'll be enough to take out some of the more stronger enemies. But in saying that, when you're on foot in the arena battles, there are some of the bosses that you won't really be able to do physical damage with them in terms of shooting them with guns, because they seem to be immune to bullets. So what you have to do is get up close and personal and punch and kick them. Now the combat is very sluggish, but if you do manage to get hits in, you can do a serious amount of damage. But there's just a lot of trial and error around many of the elements in this game. But again, it's not too difficult. But if you spent time playing this game, there is another game called Car Racing Challenge that I have covered previously on the channel, and that I used to own years ago, that I bought as a Christmas present for one of my brothers. And it has the same type of concept. Now it's not futuristic, but it is based in Japan, where you have to race from Tokyo to another city within a time frame, and your goal in that is to find and take documents with you for a court case here and to stop someone from being sent to jail, and you have to do that within a short 4-hour time frame as well. So essentially the gameplay idea and story is very similar. Just the layout of the game, just subtle instances of the story is somewhat different, but the gameplay mechanics and pretty much everything else is virtually identical. The only difference is with Road Warrior compared to the other game, as I mentioned, is that you can't use weapons, but you can steal a lot of cars, almost like in a Grand Theft Auto style. So I'll leave a link to that video then in the description so that you can check it out for yourself, and you definitely will see the similarities in most regards. But would I recommend playing it? Yeah, I actually would. Like I said, the more time I put into it, the more I really started to enjoy it. Yes, it's fiddly, it's clunky, it's cumbersome at times, and there are elements at certain points where you might find it a little bit frustrating, but just be patient with it and you'll find you'll get through it fairly easily. But at the same time, to get through the campaign, it will take a while. It'll take well over 2 hours in order to do it, but if you have that patience, I'd recommend you give it a look. It's not the worst game on the PlayStation 2, if anything it's far from it. It just is repetitive, and it probably won't appeal to everybody, but there are people out there that will enjoy this experience. But again, I will leave that up to you. So whatever you do think of this game, if you have played it, I would love to hear your thoughts and what you think of it overall, or did you even know that this game existed? So be sure to share it down in the comments below. And if you would like to see more content and videos around other unique and obscure games like this that were released in Japan only for the PlayStation 2, then be sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. And you can also check out the playlist here to see more of those games in action. And I will see you all in the next one.